Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
We've been talking for 2 years plus about constructing one's idea of God as it relates to prayer. We're going to start talking, we've been in modernity. We're going to talk today about Rav Kook. We're going to start talking about Rav Kook. That'll take us a few weeks. We will not meet next Tuesday because it's Shavuot. And then I think I am clear for at least the next 3 weeks after that. Okay. Brief introduction to Rav Kook. Rav Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, who was an Eastern European rabbi who made Aliyah and was the Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel before the state of Israel. He died in the late 30s, so he never saw the state of Israel. He also died before the Shoah, which I think is important to his thinking because he was a very optimistic thinker, and one wonders what he might have thought had he lived through World War II and the Shoah. As you may know, little background, as you may know, when Zionism arose in Europe in the late 1800s, Orthodoxy was opposed to Zionism. The traditional view of Orthodoxy, of traditional Judaism had been that humans are not supposed to do anything. Well, this was an interpretation, which kind of was the dominant one for hundreds of years. Humans should not do anything political or military. Jews should not do anything political or military to try to provoke the end time or bring Mashiach. We should just do mitzvot, and that God would bring the Messiah when God chose to, and that humans weren't supposed to do anything to reestablish sovereignty in the state of Israel. So Zionism, of course, was founded by secular people in Europe. Orthodoxy was generally opposed. There were some Orthodox rabbis who went along. Rav Kook ended up being a very strong Zionist and moved to Eretz Israel. He was an interesting figure because, of course, most of the people there back then, the 1910s, the 1920s, the 1930s, who were making Aliyah were secular. They were secular Zionists. The religious people were what was called the old Yishuv, the small numbers, hundreds plus of Jews who had been living in Eretz Israel, but all the new people who were coming were secular for the most part. So Rav Kook was a Zionist rabbi among Zionist secular people with a smattering of religious people. So he became, and by the way, in the old Yishuv, the Jews who'd been living there for a long time, they were not Zionists because they wanted to leave well enough alone. All of this is very brief. So Rav Kook ended up needing to be, or developing into, or obviously he had the stuff for it, very progressive for his day, very open to mixing with secular people and open to certain secular influences, which when his writings were written down and published decades later, some things were censored out, which have now been reprinted and uncensored and put back in, because there were certain things that were very open to the idea of that there could be wisdom from non-religious people and wisdom from non-Jewish sources. And, and he wrote a lot of stuff, and some of it he published, and a lot of it was collected after he died. It was collected and edited by his son, Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who was seen as his heir and successor as the, I'm going to put it in air quotes, modern Orthodoxy rabbinic leader of the Ashkenazi community in Eretz Israel. Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, his son, is a main figure who led Israeli national orthodoxy in the direction of the settlement movement in the 70s, settlement of the West Bank. And as you probably know, most of the energy and the effort of Israeli orthodoxy then went into settling the West Bank more so than into sort of influencing day-to-day life in the state of Israel. And that's a whole other story. So Rav Avraham Kook, Avraham Yehuda Kook, we'll talk about the name in a moment when we see the title of his book. His son was Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook. His son collected everything and edited them together. So the book is called Olat Re'iyah. So Re'iyah is Resh Aleph Yud Hey, which stands for Rav Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen. Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen. Aleph Yud Hey. So he was called the Raya Kook, as you probably know, like Rambam, Ramban. Rabbis tend to be known by acronyms. So he was known as the Raya Kook, and the title of his book on the Siddur, which is a commentary on the Siddur with some introductory essays, is called Olat Re'iyah, and that is a pun. Here it is in Hebrew, in quotes. I'm circling it with my cursor. I hope you can see that. Okay, so Re'iyah is a Hebrew verb which means to, anyone? Lirot, to see. So Re'iyah is actually a mitzvah. The mitzvah is to go visit the temple 3 times a year. Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. We're coming up on one of those times. And the mitzvah in the Bible says, Le'ra'ot et Pnei Hashem, to see God's face or to be seen by God's presence, to see God's presence or be seen by God's presence. And when you'd go there, you'd offer a sacrifice. That sacrifice could be called Olat Re'iyah. It's the sacrifice of you seeing God's presence on the pilgrimage festival. So he was called the Ra'ayah, which is spelled the same way as Re'iyah. So his book about the Siddur was called The Sacrifice of the Ra'ayah, which also means is a pun on the sacrifice of visiting the temple on a pilgrimage festival and seeing God's presence. Does everyone get that? Re'iyah, Ra'ayah, without vowels, they're exactly the same word. Resh, Aleph, Yud, Hey. If you didn't get it, don't worry about it. So that's Rav Kook's commentary on the Siddur. Okay. Close your eyes now. I don't want to make you dizzy. Get back down to I don't have. Okay. And by the way, we had an introduction, and notice that the introduction is signed by Tzvi Yehuda HaKohen Kook, line 19 there on page, what's called page 10, right? So the introduction to the book is signed by his son. There's a whole long introduction saying, I found things that he'd written. It wasn't completed. I added some other essays, and that's the introduction to the printed edition. Okay. So here's essay 1, which is an intro. Okay. A few words about Rav Kook. Rav Kook, not 100% sure. I should have looked this up what his lineage was, but he's very Hasidisha, very Hasidic. And remember that the Hasidim were heirs to the mystical tradition of the Zohar. So we'll see that in what he is saying here, what underlies his thinking is the idea, the Kabbalistic idea, that everything in the universe is connected. Everything is connected to God. Okay, remember we had the idea of the Sfirot, of God as a metaphor, the divine light pouring down through 10 aspects or 10 levels to our level, which is the Shekhinah. But that light is a sort of force which connects everything. Everything in the universe is connected. There's something godly in everything. There's something godly in all of us, which is the neshama. And what Rav Kook added to this idea, and I'm not sure I don't know if he's the one who invented this piece of it or not, was because there's a fundamental unity underlying everything, a fundamental divine unity underlying everything. It is inevitable, this was the important part of what we're going to read, inevitable that which superficially appears separate will strive to reconnect. It's like glue that stretches out but never breaks and is fundamentally connected, and the glue has an inherent quality that it wants to snap back and reconnect. And this was a part of his, I'm going to call it religious humanistic optimism. He felt that there was a certain inexorable quality to us wanting to connect with God. He has a book about tshuva and repentance in which he says tshuva is inexorable. Fancy English word meaning it's going to happen. It has to happen. And he believed it was inexorable because these were things that were fundamentally connected. So like some kind of, I guess I was going to say silly putty, but it's not, because silly putty, you could stretch it out and it would stay stretched. Something that snaps back because underlying this superficial surface, there is an inherent connection, and therefore all of creation, as we'll see, desires to reconnect with God. It's not even desires to reconnect. Reconnect implies that it got disconnected. It was never disconnected. It's an illusion that it was disconnected. So there's a fundamental underlying structure which is connected and which always desires as a inherent property, just like elements have certain properties, they want to stick together or repel each other. It's just inherent. Okay. It's an inherent property that all that is divine seeks to stick back together. Does that make sense? Nod if you got that a little bit. We'll see. Okay. So let's just jump in. The constant prayer of the soul. Sorry, I apologize for the lines are not very straight in my highlighting and my lines on the sides because I did this on an airplane with very little space. Okay. The constant, and I'm going to, that's for those who are live today. For those who are listening to the podcast, I'm going to try to re-edit this document to get rid of the other stuff and have it look. So if you look at this, if anyone who's live today looks at this online tomorrow, it'll look better, I believe. Okay. The constant prayer of the neshama strives continually to move from hidden to revealed. Okay. So he's talking about everyone's individual soul, and he is saying that it is constantly praying. How come you don't know that? Because it's hidden. But there is a striving to become revealed. The constant prayer of the neshama strives continually to move from hidden to revealed, to spread over all the forces of life of the spirit and of the vital soul. It wants to spread everywhere, to all the powers of embodied life. She, which is neshama, because neshama is Hebrew, she yearns as well to reveal her essence and the power of her actions over all her surroundings. What that means is we all have a soul. The soul is constantly praying. That aspect of the soul is hidden. There is inherent striving to make that hidden revealed, to reveal that essence, the essence of the soul, each one of us, and to reveal, this is very strong, the power of the soul's actions over all its surroundings. And come back to that. And so we find that the whole work of the Torah and all its wisdom is the constant revelation of the hidden prayer of the neshama. All humans, I'm going to restate that, all human striving towards holiness is the constant revelation of the hitherto hidden prayer of your neshama. And then he quotes a verse, like the verse says, Nishmat kol chai tivarech et shimcha, that we say on Shabbos morning, the beginning of Nishmat. Let the neshama of all living things bless you. All right? So he means your neshama and my neshama. By the way, the Hebrew word for continually is, I'm showing you with my cursor, hatfilah hamatmedet, and it wants to tamid, always, okay? Just like the word ner tamid, okay? Or olat, okay? Next paragraph. Prayer comes in its perfected form only with the consciousness that the neshama is always praying. So the neshama is always praying. Your neshama is always praying. You might not realize that. And that is why that prayer is not quite perfected. What makes it a better prayer or a more perfect prayer is only when you're conscious of that. In the time of active prayer, the soul's ceaseless prayer is revealed in actuality. Active prayer means you're davening. So it's only when you're actually davening that your soul's prayer, which was there all along, you didn't realize it, actually is revealed. Metaphor, because you know that Kabbalistic thinkers, all, not just Kabbalists, all mystics, because they're trying to explain the ineffable, they resort to metaphors, right? Like a rose that opens its fair petals to greet the dew or the sun's rays. The rose is there all along, correct? It's just closed. At certain times, it opens. The nimshal of that, I don't think there's a good word for nimshal in Ish, the thing that the parable stands for, the thing that the metaphor stands for, is your soul is like the rose. It's always there. It's always praying. It's only at certain times that it becomes fully fulfilled and apparent, the opening of the rose, and that's when you say, up, time for Shema, time for davening, show up at Daily Minyan, okay? That's when the rose opens. It was there all along. I don't know if I wanted to include this or not. Prayer asks that the neshama fulfill her role. So davening, why do we daven? Because it's time for the neshama to step up and do what it's supposed to do. What is it supposed to do? Become manifest and open. When days and years pass without properly aligned prayer, battering stones, not a very avnei negef rabim, whatever, rocks accumulate. I'm going to say rocks accumulate around the heart, through which we feel an inner spiritual lethargy. You go too long without, I'm not going to say davening, I'm going to say spiritual practice. You go too long without a spiritual practice, schmutz accumulates around the heart. And when the good spirit returns and the gift of prayer is given from above, it's a gift that remember, it's the rays of the sun that open the rose. Then we move forward with each prayer, removing the obstacles and the many blockages which have gathered in the flowing river of the highest soul of life begin to clear. We have seen that metaphor before of the river, right? We talk about flow of light. In modern Californian parlance, we say energy, we say breath, right? Nishima and nishama. So different metaphors that are used in mystical thinking for explaining how things are connected. Here, it's the river. So there's a river that's flowing and it gets blocked because we get out of practice spiritually if we don't do spiritual practice. If you're a meditator and you haven't meditated in a long time, it's harder to meditate, okay? Prayer, and again, when he says prayer, he means, I'm just going to show the word, here it is, second line, circling with my cursor, tefillah, okay, over and over again. He just uses the word tefillah, okay, prayer, nothing fancy. Prayer actualizes and brings to light, to complete life, that which is hidden in the depths of the neshama. We just sort of said that, right? Just kind of a recapitulation. And according to the measure of one's inner purity, so is the magnitude of the impact of prayer's appearance when their inner will emerges from their depths as they turn to the source of the life of all the souls and all the world. Source capitalized. So Hashem, obviously is referring to God, is the source of life of all of souls. All our souls, the source of them is God. God is the source of all the worlds. So if there's a flow, the flow comes from the unending well. That's God, okay? And I'm not sure what he means here. I don't think we have to dig too deeply into it. The measure of your inner purity. Let's call it how good by the way, I think we all have the experience of sometimes I had a really good davening this morning and sometimes I didn't have a great davening this morning. How many people have ever had that experience? Raise your hand, right? Sometimes you feel like, yeah, I felt it was very deep today, okay? So it's the quality of the magnitude of the depths, the measure of your inner purity. I was really focused today. I was really thinking about the words. I had great kavana. It's not always like that. You could measure it on a kavana scale, like a dipstick or something. So according to the magnitude, the measure of your inner purity, the quality, I'm going to call it the quality of your davening that day, so is the magnitude of the impact of your prayer. Now he's talking about the impact of prayer as it reconnects. This is what I want to get to. Next paragraph. Prayer deepens within us. Prayer deepens within us the highest holy feeling. So our davening does something to us. That highest holy feeling is the essence absorbed of the light of the life giver of the worlds in our soul. So tefillah, prayer, deepens within us some feeling which is the essence that we have absorbed of the light from the life giver. He says life giver, it might also say light giver. Okay, that would be accurate also. So now he's doing the metaphor of light. He did river, now he's doing light. Again, because we've looked at Kabbalistic thinking, this is all very familiar to us. And you say, well, this is just kind of a tweak on Kabbalah. Okay, so when we daven, when we pray, and we can do it, more deeply or less deeply, better, more kavana davening or more superficial davening, Okay. It deepens within us that aspect of our divine light. Okay. And then he says something, we're not going to read the whole sentence, about individual and communal, but he says communal is better than individual, right? Because if it's individual, it's just like one little rose on a bush, right? If it's communal, if we're in shul, I shouldn't be saying this because I'm pretty bad at this. If we're together in shul, it's a rose bush. What's more impressive? One rose on a bush? You see, oh my God, look at this beautiful rose bush with all the roses open, right? We've all had that experience, okay? She, by the way, what is this she? Is she the neshama or the prayer? I'm not clear. Or is it the highest holy feeling? Give me 1 second, because I have a sentence that starts with she is prayer. Okay, she is the prayer. She flows from the transcendent divine spring, fancy word of saying God, in which all that is elevated and holy are combined. Okay, so everything that is elevated and holy combined is the divine spring, which is the metaphor for God. Okay, and that spring flows into us, and from which they flow. What's the they? All that is raised up, all the holiness in the world. And here's what I want you to get to. And to it she returns in mighty strength. Okay, so the flow comes from the divine spring into us, meaning our neshamas come from God. And in prayer, our neshamas return to God. The flow returns to God. It's not like rivers that run into the sea. It's a circular thing. To it, she returns, prayer, or the soul, in mighty strength, filled with the holiest of holy, adding blessing. Okay, this is big. Adding blessing to the wellspring of life, girding the whole tree of life and glorifying its branches. This is straight up Kabbalah, meaning what we do down here as a metaphor, actually affects up above, right? Because when we pray, when we allow our divine light to be manifest, now I switch back from water to light, we are adding our light back to the source of light. When we allow the flow of, I'm just going to call it, I'll be very Californian, soul energy out, when we bring it out from concealment to revealment, especially when we do it communally, not just individually, especially when we do it with great kavana, not just superficially, then what are we doing? We are actually adding blessing to the source of life, right? That means God. We are doing something to God. Or, I'm going to say it a little less mystically, we are increasing godliness in the universe. We are watering the tree of life. Its rivulets join one to another, filling rivers of delight, which satisfy with joy, united as a source of blessing and rivers and abundant love and blessing and peace for all the cosmos. And when the prayer of Israel is lifted to the holy light, streams flood all the worlds. Myriad souls are renewed in the radiance from above, and the transcendent glory receives blessing forever. And the verse he quotes, Baruch Kevod Hashem Mimakomo, except it's not clear which direction he means that in. Usually we say Baruch Kevod Hashem Mimakomo means God's kavod, God's glory, flows from its place, which is, up there somewhere. But here he's saying, actually, when we're releasing the soul energy through prayer, we are reconnecting the flow back to the source, which means, I'm not sure he means this, maybe he means, Baruch Kevod Hashem Komo means we release the divine flow from its place here. Did everyone get that? Okay? Because he's saying, when we're davening, we're releasing the streams back to God, which strengthens the God. Our water flows into the pool. That makes more water in the pool. Our water flows from the pool. We're always connected to the pool, even though we don't realize that. There are times when we uncover that and make that manifest. Those are times of prayer. We do it better when we have good davening, whatever that means. There's more of it when it's communal rather than individual, and it flows back to God. And we are, I'm circling here, What we do fills rivers of delight, united as a source of blessing, right? We create that, or I don't want to say create because that implies de novo. We strengthen that when we are pouring water, when we allow our rivers to flow back into the pool. So this is a circulating pool, okay? I think one more passage. Prayer is for us. This is Rav Kook's doctrine of inevitability. Prayer is for us and for the whole world an absolute necessity. The waves of our soul pour outward. And again, our soul means each one of us, our individual soul. The waves of our soul pour outward, and we desire from ourselves and from the world a wholeness of the sort which bounded existence cannot provide. What's bounded existence? That I have a body and that you have a body, that things appear to be finite, okay? We all desire from the world a type of wholeness which our regular day-to-day consciousness of finitude cannot provide. And because it cannot provide, we find ourselves mired in great anguish, whose sadness has the potential to remove us from our consciousness of self and of creator. Because I'm limited and finite, and I say, oi, woe is me, I don't have enough money, and the car is breaking down, and the roof is leaking, and I'm all alone, and et cetera, I experience myself as limited and finite. And this leads to a feeling of great anguish, and this sadness has the potential to make us forget our consciousness of our true self and of God. But before much time passes, before these shallows can manifest within us, we come and pray. This is part of his inevitability, right? On the one hand, that sense of my limited finitude and helplessness fills me with a sense of anguish and sadness, which separates me from God and which makes me feel like myself is separate from God. But then somehow, before this gets too bad, we come and pray, we pour out our plea, and we are lifted up to a world of existence whole to the utmost wholeness. So prayer, tefillah, davening, spiritual practice helps, give me a moment, reorient ourselves to the reality that everything is connected. That reality was there all along, says Rav Kook. You just didn't realize it because you were cranky, because you were worried about day-to-day things. And then when that happens, our inner world is made truly whole and our consciousness is filled with serenity. I think I have one. We'll pause more passage. By the way, I just love this word in Hebrew. This is his word. He wrote in Hebrew, not Yiddish. Hatfilah hi ha-ideal shel kol olamim. That is the word for ideal. Ideal. There are other words in Hebrew, but I guess whenever he wrote it in 1920-something, he couldn't find a better word. Prayer is the ideal of all worlds. All being yearns for the source of its life. This is about his inevitability and inexorability. All the water desires to return to the source of water. It's just an inherent property. And notice now he talks about everything, not just people. All being yearns for the source of its life. Every sprout and every bush, every grain of sand and clod of earth, everything in which life is revealed, and all in which it is hidden. Notice, by the way, that also includes inanimate things. You know, that old game, 20 questions, is it animal, vegetable, or mineral? He would include mineral, okay? Everything has its divine essence. All that is little in creation and all that is great. The heavens above and the fiery holy angels, all particularity in existence and all its universality, everything moans, longs, yearns, and thirsts toward the cherished wholeness of its transcendent source, right? Everything, because everything has a divine essence, yearns for the wholeness of its source, and that is the living, the holy, the pure, the mighty. And humanity, people, absorbs these yearnings at all times and in every moment, and we are lifted up and elevated through this holy pining. Our soul is pining to be reconnected to its source, and tefillah allows that to happen. The time for the revelation of these longings toward the divine loftiness comes in prayer. man, by which he means humanity, people, lifts, by the way, what's his Hebrew word? Is it ha'adam? I'm just curious. Ha'adam, yeah, which is a male term, but is used to mean non-genderedness. It means the humanity lifts up the entire creation through humanity's prayer, and through it unifies with human self all that is, elevating everything, lifting all to the source of blessing and the source of life. Hebrew, makor habracha, source of blessing, umakor hachayim. I'll pause in a moment. Okay, so basically Rav Kook is saying, I'm going to stop sharing. Everything is connected in a flow, various metaphors. We forget that. It's an illusion that it's not. All that is in our neshama, but our neshama is asleep. He doesn't use that metaphor. There are other thinkers who use the metaphor of sleeping and waking. He calls it concealed. In tefillah, we help it be revealed. We do a better job if we have kavanah. He has a lot of stuff about kavanah. We do a better job if we're communal. Okay? And what do we do when we're doing that? We're allowing the potential of that which was there all the time. Everything is actually all connected because it is. That is the nature of existence. The separation and finitude is an illusion. This is back to Kabbalistic panentheism, right? There is divinity in everything. And when we pray, we kind of reveal that and strengthen that. And he says, and this is a big deal, and this is, again, very Kabbalistic, in doing that, we are actually, in releasing our water to flow back to the pool, which is the source of everything, we are actually increasing that pool of water. We are watering the tree of life. I know he doesn't go further here. What does it mean that we are? But this is basically the idea of, the Kabbalistic thing. Remember we said that little formula? I do this thing to connect the Yud Hey to the Vav Hey, right? To connect the Kadosh Baruch Hu to the Shechina. I'm doing this mitzvah in order to strengthen God, right? In the Kabbalistic formula, it's by reuniting the male and the female principle, which have become separated, okay? The God above from the God's presence below. But this is another version of the Kabbalistic idea that what we do here has impact on the universe. It's actually pretty chutzpahdik and radical. It's not just I had a spiritually fulfilling moment in davening. It actually has an impact on the world. By the way, notice, and he'll talk about this later on, the impact on the world doesn't necessarily include, I prayed for healing for someone who was sick and they got better. It doesn't necessarily include, I prayed to get that job and I got that job. That's not what he's talking about when he is talking about the impact of prayer. He's talking about reconnecting the wholeness of the universe, which is fundamentally there, but that we fail to realize it. Okay, pause. 3 minutes of discussion. Michael.
So I take it then that if Rav Kook were to have encountered a secular person who claimed to be an atheist, totally denied the existence of God, he would still tell that person, you may think that, but that's just because you don't realize that your soul is praying.
Yes, and I'll add to that. I want to take that a step further, and this is actually going to relate to someone we're going to read, another modern thinker we're going to read about later, Rabbi Yitzhak Greenberg. But Rav Kook would say sometimes people are doing God's work, but they don't realize that it's God's work because that's not how they framed it. He believed that the secular Zionists who came to settle the land were doing God's work. He has a passage, he wrote a column, this is one of his progressive thoughts. He spent some time in London during World War I, and he went to the British Museum, and he saw, it was probably a Rembrandt. So you probably know there's a midrash about the light that was created on the first day of creation. How could it be the light on the first day, but the sun, moon, and the stars on the fourth day? Wasn't there light? What happened to the light? What does the midrash say? God took that, there was some miraculous light from day one, via which you could look from one end of the world to the other, and God took that light and hid it away in the Geniza for the world to come, okay? Which means there's some supernal, deeper, more miraculous, illuminative light, which was at the beginning of time and which will be at the end of time, which is somehow not natural sunlight. And it's called the light of the 7 days of creation, or Sheshet Yemei Bereshit. That's what it's called in the Midrash, or sometimes Shivat Yemei, 7 days of creation. Okay. Rav Kook has a passage in which he says, I actually just saw a Rembrandt in a museum 3 days ago. I love Rembrandt's self-portraits. He says, I saw a painting in the British Museum. I'm not sure if in the source it's Rembrandt or people impute that. And I saw the light that the artist put on the subject's face. And I felt like this must be a little bit of the light of the 6 days of creation. That's the kind of stuff that was censored out of the Frum edition of the first edition of his work. In other words, what he's saying is there's godliness out there, even when people don't realize. People are sometimes channels for the divine. They don't know that. By the way, we would say, I think we contemporary people would say, I would say, they don't know that because that's not their frame of discourse. Yitz Greenberg says, we'll read him, he says, all those scientists and doctors working on cures for cancer to alleviate suffering, they're doing God's work, whether or not they frame it as such. So it's actually, by the way, you can see this as paternalistic. Oh, you poor atheist, you don't understand, right? Or you can see it as like, no, I get it that that's not your frame of reference, but I see what you are doing as holy within my frame of reference. It really enlarges, I think it enlarges the consciousness of what a religious person can see as sacred. You're doing sacred work. Even if you don't use the word sacred, it's not part of your vocabulary because you have a different vocabulary. Okay. So, and by the way, and Rav Kook says this explicitly about the secular pioneers, right? And he has to wrestle with the sort of paradox that religious Judaism was very late to the party of Zionism. We know that in America also, right? The Reform movement was anti-Zionist in the 1930s, okay, until relatively late. Everything changed after the Shoah, okay, and the establishment of the State of Israel. So liberal Judaism was not Zionist. There's a famous Reform sermon, the 1830s or something, read in rabbinical school, in which the tagline is, it's about we no longer pray because we're good, loyal German citizens or European citizens of whatever country we're in. We no longer pray for our restoration in the Holy Land. And the line is, Hamburg is our Jerusalem, Berlin is our Jerusalem. Irony of ironies, about 100 years before the Shoah. The Reform rabbi said that from the pulpit, okay? So the religious movements, the overtly religious movements, were very late to the party of Zionism. And Rav Kook had to sort of wrestle with the kind of conundrum that the people who were settling the land were godless atheists. Very often they were avowed godless atheists, okay? And he said, they're doing the Lord's work. So that's my answer to you, my response. And Rav Kook would surely have said that. Any other comments, questions, thoughts? It's kind of mind-blowing when you sort of see the chutzpah of it. And again, restatement, all is connected under the surface. We don't realize that. And sometimes our piece of the divine flow gets blocked. A lot of other thinkers will say asleep, okay, occluded, and we do certain things. By the way, he wouldn't say only tefillah, he would say other spiritual practices, but this is his commentary on the Siddur, by Bernie, where we kind of release the light, we release the flow, we become aware of it, we strengthen it when we do it with others, we strengthen it when we do it well, and when we do that, we are returning our piece of flow to the divine flow, and we are strengthening and increasing. I think I want to take back increasing, because energy is neither created nor destroyed. We are reconnecting drops of energy, something like that. Okay, Bernie.
Yeah, I quickly want to comment that my great uncle was the religious presence in Lexington, Kentucky, up until 1928 when the real rabbi came in. He was a sheikh, and he supplied meat to everybody, even to Cincinnati. Rav Kook came and he sent you the inscription, sent him a big picture from Jerusalem, from his yeshiva, thanking Reverend Goler for helping him for years. And he stayed with him on Shabbos. And my great aunt remembered that he would ask the women to come down when they discussed the Talmud in the afternoon. So he was liberal in some ways. I'll send the pictures to anyone that's interested.
Please send it to me. Yeah.
I did. Okay. It's already on the way.
Thank you.
Also, I'll send you various pictures. I just found them.
Okay.
Thank you.
I am, and I would speak on behalf of all of us, Bernie, when I say I am duly impressed.
Well, no, I know you think I don't have yichus, but I do in a certain way.
He's got yichus. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. It is the, what is it? It's the, 44th day of the Omer. And I'll see you after Shavuos, God willing, in 2 weeks.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.